When a veteran is being treated unfairly, would you stand up to defend them if you were there? This is how one young man turned silent endurance into a powerful movement. The bustling terminal at Miami International Airport echoed with the familiar sounds of rolling suitcases, muffled announcements, and the murmured conversations of travelers. Near Gate E15 stood a Navy veteran named Andrew, accompanied by his Labrador service dog, Rex. The pair was hard to miss. Andrew, in his early 40s, wore a faded denim jacket and a cap embroidered with the words, "Arm." Rex, outfitted in a service dog vest, sat upright, his deep brown eyes scanning the crowd, always on duty. Andrew wasn't just another passenger. After years of service overseas and the challenges of returning to civilian life, Rex had become more than just a companion. He was Andrew's lifeline, trained to detect and assist during anxiety attacks or sudden bouts of panic. Flying was never easy for Andrew, but Rex made it manageable. Together, they were booked on Flight 573 to Chicago, where Andrew was scheduled to attend a veterans conference. As boarding began, Andrew approached the gate agent with his boarding pass and Rex's paperwork. Instead of the routine acknowledgement, the agent frowned and began scrolling through her tablet. "I'm sorry, sir," she said hesitantly, "but there's an issue with bringing your dog on this flight." Andrew frowned, confused. "An issue? Rex is a registered service dog. I have all the paperwork right here." The agent glanced quickly at the line forming behind Andrew and lowered her voice. "It's a new airline policy. Some animals, even with documentation, are no longer allowed on board." Nearby passengers began to slow down, their attention drawn to the conversation. Andrew's voice, though calm, carried an edge of tension. "You're mistaken," he said, his tone sharper now. "Rex is not a pet, he's a service dog. Do you even understand what that means? He's here to ensure my medical safety." The agent shifted uncomfortably, her fingers fidgeting on the tablet. "I'm just following protocol, sir," she replied. Rex, sensing Andrew's unease, gently nudged his owner's leg with his nose, a gesture meant to anchor him, but Andrew's patience was wearing thin. "Following protocol? That's not good enough." Andrew's voice was low but charged with anger. "I served this country. I didn't ask for the challenges I brought back with me, but I'm doing my best to handle them. And now you're telling me I can't board because of some ridiculous policy?" The exchange was no longer just between Andrew and the agent. Passengers nearby began to take notice, exchanging looks and murmurs. A middle-aged man in a suit stepped out of line, crossing his arms as he observed. A young mother holding her baby paused, her eyes narrowing as she listened. The tension at gate A15 was palpable, as if something was about to shift. Andrew's frustration rippled through the crowd, impossible to ignore. Rex, calm as ever, seemed to highlight the injustice of the situation. The murmurs among passengers grew louder, their displeasure evident. "Are you kidding me?" An older man in a baseball cap muttered to his wife. "That man fought for this country, and now they're giving him grief over his dog?" The gate agent, visibly flustered, looked toward her manager who had just arrived. The manager, exuding a rehearsed calmness, addressed Andrew. "Sir, we understand your concern, but this is airline policy. We can't make exceptions." Andrew's voice rose, deliberate and powerful. "Exceptions? This isn't about exceptions. This is about rights. You don't get to decide that my service dog is invalid because of a policy you don't even fully understand." Rex stood, pressing his body against Andrew's leg, offering silent reassurance. Passengers began to edge closer, their initial curiosity giving way to indignation. "This is not right," a young woman holding her boarding pass said loudly. "If it were a pet, fine, but this is a service dog." A man in his 30s pulled out his phone and started recording. "People need to see this," he said to no one in particular. "This is outrageous." The manager sighed, clearly feeling the weight of the crowd's attention. "Sir," he said, attempting to maintain control, "we can try to arrange another flight where this won't be an issue." Andrew locked eyes with him, his voice trembling with controlled anger. "Do you think rebooking solves this? Rex isn't just a dog. He's the only reason I can even set foot in this airport. This isn't just about me. It's about how people like me are treated, Andrew said, his voice steady but tinged with bitterness. The crowd around him began to grow. A mother with a stroller moved closer, her brow furrowed in frustration. An elderly woman clutching her handbag nodded firmly in agreement, her sharp gaze unwavering. A man recording the scene spoke up. "Aren't service dogs protected by law? This doesn't seem legal." The supervisor, clearly flustered, glanced nervously at the camera before replying, his voice faltering. "We're just following the airline's new policy," he said, but the confidence in his tone had begun to waver. Andrew turned to face the crowd, his voice growing louder and more forceful. "Do you hear this? After everything I've been through, they want to deny me basic respect over a policy. Is this how we treat each other now?" The terminal fell silent. A tense, suffocating stillness where no one knew what to do next. The frustration in the air was palpable, and Andrew's anger was almost tangible. But just as the situation threatened to escalate further, a calm yet commanding voice broke through the silence. All eyes turned toward the source, and standing just a few steps away was a tall young man exuding quiet confidence. Barron's composed demeanor and polished appearance stood in stark contrast to the escalating chaos around him. It took the crowd a moment to realize who he was, but the recognition spread quickly, like wildfire. "That's Barron Trump," someone whispered loudly enough to confirm what others were thinking. Carrying a small backpack and a boarding pass, Barron stepped toward Andrew and Rex. His voice was measured but carried an authority far beyond his years. "Excuse me," he said, his gaze fixed firmly on the supervisor. "What's going on here?" The supervisor, caught off guard, hesitated before answering. "This gentleman's service dog doesn't meet the new requirements for the flight," he said, struggling to maintain his composure. Barron raised an eyebrow, his eyes shifting from Andrew to Rex. "Doesn't meet the requirements? This man is a Navy veteran and that's a service dog. What part of this situation seems acceptable to you?" Emboldened by Barron's presence, the crowd began murmuring in agreement. A nearby woman spoke up. "Exactly. He's not asking for anything unreasonable." Barron's voice remained calm, but there was an unmistakable sharpness to his words. "I'm fairly certain federal law protects service dogs regardless of airline policies. Are you really willing to break the law over this?" The supervisor's confidence visibly crumbled. He opened his mouth to respond, but Barron continued, his tone growing firmer. "This isn't just about policies, it's about doing what's right. Imagine what this man has been through, and now you're denying him his dignity over a technicality." Andrew, who had been standing silently, finally spoke, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I never expected anyone to stand up for me like this, but thank you." Barron nodded at him, then turned back to the supervisor. "I suggest you call someone higher up to address this, because if you don't, this issue will become far bigger than you can handle." The man recording the scene chimed in. "People are filming this from every angle. Do you really want to be the face of this story when it hits the news?" The supervisor, now visibly sweating, pulled out his radio and stepped back. "Let me speak with the duty manager," he said, his earlier composure all but gone. Barron turned back to Andrew and extended his hand. "Thank you for your service, sir." Andrew shook his hand, gratitude shining through his weariness. "I've seen a lot in my life, but this is a first. You didn't have to do this, but I truly appreciate it." Rex, as if sensing the shift in the atmosphere, wagged his tail gently, his calm demeanor reassuring. Though the tide seemed to be turning, the issue was far from resolved. The crowd remained silent but expectant, holding their collective breath as they waited to see what would happen next. As the supervisor disappeared into a nearby office to make his call, the atmosphere at Gate F-15 transformed. From frustration to anticipation, from anger to hope. What started as a tense conversation had now transformed into a collective stand. Passengers moved closer, their voices growing louder. Some continued recording, while others openly voiced their frustrations. "This is bigger than airline policy," a middle-aged man said emphatically, his voice laced with anger. "We're talking about basic human rights. Have they forgotten that?" A young mother with a stroller glanced up, her eyes blazing with indignation. This is unacceptable. This man is a veteran and that's his service dog. This isn't a debate, it's an obligation to do what's right. Barron, standing tall beside Andrew, spoke up, his voice strong yet calm. We cannot ignore situations like this. Speaking up might not always be easy, but it's necessary. If we stay silent, what does that say about our values? The surrounding crowd began to murmur in agreement, nodding heads and quiet affirmations spreading like ripples. An elderly woman with a cane stepped forward, determination lighting her eyes. Son, I've lived long enough to know that when someone stands up for what's right, you stand with them. No one should have to fight alone. Applause began to scatter through the crowd, growing steadily louder, startling the gate staff. One of the agents whispered nervously to a colleague, her eyes darting toward the increasingly vocal group. Andrew, moved by the support, glanced around, his voice trembling as he spoke. I don't even know what to say. For years I felt invisible, like no one really saw what people like me go through. But today, you've made me feel valued again. Rex leaned gently against Andrew's leg, his calm presence grounding his owner in the moment. A teenage boy approached, clutching a small notebook. Sir, can I shake your hand? My grandpa was in the army too. Andrew smiled faintly and extended his hand. Your grandpa must be proud of you. You got a strong heart, kid. The gate supervisor returned, his face etched with weariness and uncertainty. Clearing his throat, he stepped toward Barron and Andrew. We've spoken with management, and they've agreed to make an exception in this case, he said, his voice steady but lacking enthusiasm. The crowd erupted into cheers, but Andrew raised a hand to quiet them. He spoke with a calm yet resolute tone. An exception? I don't need an exception. This is about rights, not just for me, but for every veteran and person with disabilities. Rex and I don't need special treatment. We need respect. Barron nodded, his expression firm. He's absolutely right. This can't stop here. Policies like this need serious review. No one should have to fight for what's already protected by law. The supervisor, visibly uncomfortable, mumbled, "We'll pass this feedback to the leadership team." But the energy in the crowd had shifted. This was no longer just Andrew's story. It had become something larger. A fight everyone felt compelled to support. The cheers gradually faded as the supervisor stepped back, his attempt to regain control slipping further. Andrew took a deep breath, adjusting his stance. He wasn't looking for a temporary victory. He wanted real change. Sensing this, Barron stepped closer and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "This isn't just about one flight or one veteran," Barron said, his voice commanding. "This is about respecting those who have sacrificed for this country. Unjust policies don't just inconvenience, they harm." The supervisor hesitated, then nodded stiffly. "You're right," he admitted, though his tone sounded more like surrender than conviction. "We'll escalate this matter to the higher-up." Andrew looked at Barron, gratitude shining in his eyes. "You didn't have to do all this. You could have just stood by." Barron shook his head, his tone resolute. "If we stand still and do nothing, a part of the problem. My father always told me that doing the right thing isn't all easy, but it's always worth it." The supervisor gestured toward the boarding area. "Mr. Andrew, Rex has been cleared to board. We'll make sure you're seated comfortably." Andrew nodded, his shoulders visibly relaxing, though his voice remained steady. "Thank you, but I hope you'll think about this. For the others who will find themselves in my shoes." As Andrew and Rex approached Gate 15, the crowd erupted into thunderous applause. But it wasn't just for them. It was for the values and principles they represented. Encouraging shouts filled the air. "Thank you for standing up," and "This is the right thing to do." Smiles spread across faces, and many passengers raised their phones, continuing to capture the moment. Barron stood still for a moment, his eyes following Andrew and Rex as they walked toward the boarding area. A young woman, about 30 years old, stepped up beside him. "What you did was incredible," she said, her voice full of admiration. "Most people wouldn't dare say anything." Barron offered a faint smile, his expression calm and steady. "Most people care," he replied. "They just need a reminder that they can make a difference." From the jet bridge, Andrew turned back to glance at Barron. Their eyes met in a silent but profound moment. Andrew raised his hand in a gesture of deep gratitude. His face reflected both relief and determination. Rex, as if sensing the significance of the moment, wagged his tail gently before stepping through the plane's doorway alongside Andrew. But as the cabin door closed, the true impact of what had just happened lingered in the air of the terminal. The atmosphere at Miami International Airport seemed different, no longer the usual chaotic bustle, but a feeling of unity, as if everyone had witnessed something far greater than themselves. Passengers exchanged knowing glances and quiet remarks. That was powerful, and it restores my faith in people. Strangers who might have otherwise passed each other without a second thought now felt a quiet connection, one forged in a shared stand for what was right. On Flight 573, Andrew sat by the window, with Rex resting calmly at his feet. He gazed out at the tarmac, the tension from the earlier confrontation finally dissipating. For the first time in a long while, he felt seen. Not just as a veteran, but as a person deserving of respect and understanding. A few rows back, Barron Trump sat quietly, not seeking attention or recognition for what he had done. His satisfaction came from knowing he had acted when it mattered most. A flight attendant approached him and leaned in. "Thank you for what you did earlier. You really made a difference." Barron nodded slightly and responded simply, "We all did." As the plane ascended, the crowd at gate F-15 began to disperse, but the story continued to spread. Social media posts quickly surfaced with hashtags like "Respect our veterans and our heroes," which soon became trending topics. Videos of the incident garnered thousands of comments, praising the courage and determination of those who stood up, especially the young man who had led the charge. This moment wasn't just a fleeting event. It became a powerful reminder that small actions can spark profound change. The message was clear. Every day, we have a choice. We can choose to act, to speak up, and to stand for what is right. Compassion and courage are contagious, and when one person stands up, they empower others to do the same. When we unite, change becomes not only possible, but inevitable. If this story has touched your heart, we'd love for you to share its message by liking and sharing it with your friends, helping us reach our first milestone of 1,000 subscribers, which means the world to us and allows us to create more meaningful stories for you. Don't forget to share your thoughts about the story and let us know which city you're watching from. Thank you for your support, and we'll see you in our next story.